Hello and welcome back to A Method to the Madness, the fortnightly podcast where we discuss, analyze, and otherwise ponder our favourite films and television. I'm your host Patrick, and joining me as always is my co-host Mitchie.
Hello, Pat.
Hey man, this is our Christmas special.
Yeah, this is our summer. It's a Christmas special. It's definitely a Christmas movie. What is it?
Good thing we picked a pertinent movie, yeah. It's Magnolia, the 1999 film directed and written by Paul Thomas Anderson, our first PTA film. Exciting.
The PTA.
Yeah, starring Jeremy Blackman, Tom Cruise, Melinda Dillon, Philip Baker Hall, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Ricky Jay, William H. Macy, Alfred Molina, Julianne Moore, John C. Reilly, Jason Robards, and Melora Walters. Damn.
Is one of those fucking Doc Ock. Doc Ock's
Yeah,
in
Alfred
this.
Molina.
Yeah.
As always, we'll go into our general impressions of the film. What do you think of this?
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting fucking film. I didn't really know what it's about, and I've not really experienced much PTA before. I've only seen The Master, and it was so long ago I barely remember it. But man, like when I watched it, it was just like a lot of the movie is just made by the start and end scenes where you got that introduction of those stories at the start, and then it kind of sets this mood up in you, like. You can't really kind of identify it straight away, but it does certainly set the movie up, and then you kind of see how the intricate connections between all these different characters work. And to me, it kind of felt like a Dharma film by the end of it. I was kind of like amazed by like what it stood for, and like this representation for me just felt like it was just exploring just life, and making it seem meaningful, even though it's not infallible in a way. But we'll talk about that later. But like, yeah, and
I also felt that.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's definitely some sort of, it definitely kind of feels like a Dharma film like we've discussed before. And a lot of that is due to the frog scene as well. Like, man, that was like a well-timed fucking scene for me. Like, I was watching it, I was like, holy fuck, what the fuck? And then it kind of like it clicked in a way where I don't really quite understand what exactly it stands for, which is why I'm excited to discuss it. But it did click anyway in a more emotional level. So like in terms of, I love this film. I think it's great. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's just interesting. Like, I can't even like quite explain why it is, but which is why we're going to discuss it. But I love it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
The frog bit.
Yeah.
This absurd, event in a relatively grounded film. It reminds me of there's this other film called Sorry to Bother You. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but yeah, at the climax, something just fucking really absurd happens, and it's so funny. It just reminded me of that. And obviously, it's intentional in a way where you're supposed to derive a lot of meaning from it, which I thought, I don't know. Obviously, when I saw that in this film, I was like, holy shit. I was like, okay, I'm pretty excited to get into like the meat and potatoes of what this means.
Whether it means something as well, that's a great thing.
So yeah, I didn't pause this movie once, which is a bigger deal than it seems.
Yep, that's fucking true. I was like, sorry, I was just going to say like, I wasn't looking forward to watching it because it's 3 hours and 10 minutes long. But I didn't pause it once, and I watched it the whole way through, and it was so fucking good. Like, somehow, even though there's nothing particularly exciting going on.
I think it's the music, dude. It just keeps you going.
Yeah.
Like, it makes everything seem really important. Yeah. Bar the plot with Linda as Earl's trophy wife, I thought every story was really interesting.
Yeah.
I love when comedy actors take on dramatic roles. So I really loved John C. Reilly in this movie. I thought he delivered a really human performance.
Yeah.
And Tom Cruise also, like, this is his best role, I think. Bar the Mission
100%.
Impossible movies, which isn't really like a character. This is like as far as dramatic roles go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited now to watch some more PTA films. I've only seen another one. Phantom Thread is the only PTA film I've seen.
Yep.
So yeah, this has got me excited to see more. Specifically, Boogie Nights. I think that's the next one. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so let's go into a plot summary.
The film begins with the narrator telling 3 stories, all with wildly incredible coincidences. He suggests that these did not happen by chance, but by some other mysterious force. We then cut sporadically between an ensemble of different characters who are all intricately connected. These include a devout Christian and well-meaning policeman, Jim Curring, a cocaine addict, Claudia Wilson, her father, the host of a brainy children quiz show, Jimmy Gator, the genius of the children's team on the same show, Stanley Spector, the prodigal child of the same show many decades ago, Donnie Smith, a wealthy but dying TV mogul and producer of the same show, Earl Partridge, Earl's diligent nurse, Phil Farmer, and Earl's trophy wife, Linda, And finally, Earl's hateful son, a boisterous pickup artist, Frank T.J. Mackey. To begin, our cocaine addict Claudia is visited by her father, Jimmy, who seeks reconciliation from a hateful daughter after being diagnosed with inoperable cancer. That night, policeman Jim attends to a noise complaint. This turns out to be Claudia, whom he falls for and asks her on a date. She accepts. At the same time, Jimmy attends his quiz show. Stanley, the genius child, who is under heavy pressure from his father to win, begins the quiz with success. However, the show producer won't let him go to the bathroom between shoots and he wets himself. His team gradually falls behind as he is unable to answer questions due to his embarrassment. Then Jimmy Gator's illness kicks in and he faints on live TV. Meanwhile, Donnie, the former prodigal child, watches that night's show from a bar after being fired from his job. He laments about how his life has worsened since his childhood and how his parents forced him to attend the show only to steal his prize money. Meanwhile, in the wealthier areas of LA, Earl lies on his deathbed. He has a dying wish for his nurse, Phil, to find his estranged son, Frank T.J. Mackey, who has been given seminars the same day advising lonely groups of men on how to find women. Phil successfully coerces Frank to see his father. Meanwhile, Earl's wife Linda, feeling guilty over the fact that she just used Earl for his money, tries to get his will changed so that she will not inherit any of his wealth. She then picks up his prescription medicine and attempts to kill herself with them. She is collected by an ambulance. Later that night, Jim and Claudia go on a date. They make a pact to be honest with each other despite the risk of repulsing each other. Jim reveals that he lost his handgun at work and laments about his incompetence. Claudia is too afraid to confide in Jim, but they share a kiss, then she runs home. Jimmy Gator goes home to his wife. Knowing of his inevitable death, he confesses to her that not only did he cheat on her, but he molested their daughter, Claudia. His wife leaves and Jimmy contemplates suicide. Meanwhile, Donnie concocts a plan to get back at his boss, stealing his money. However, on the way home, he changes his mind and decides to return it. As he is returning it, our policeman Jim spots the suspicious Donnie. As he pulls in to confront him, suddenly, out of nowhere and with no warning, frogs start raining from the sky. This causes a number of things. It ruins Jimmy's suicide attempt. The danger of the raining frogs brings Claudia and her mother back together. Earl wakes up in time to see his son, Frank, next to him. The ambulance carrying Linda crashes. Donnie, who is out in the open, is saved by Jim, who convinces him to return the money. Stanley looks out into the absurd weather event and muses that this is a thing that happens and tells his father that he has to be nicer to him. The film ends with the same story it began with. The narrator implies that coincidences are not coincidences at all. End. Fuck. That was...
Damn.
I think, yeah, it's not really... Like, if you just listen to that, you probably should have watched the movie, which I'm assuming you did anyway, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this. But, like, yeah, if you didn't listen to the movie, then none of that makes much sense. And I apologize, but it's a fucking complicated plot.
Yeah. It's just like...
A lot of stories.
I don't know, it's... Well, yeah, but the plot read out like that sounds so arbitrary because a lot of the movie is just so well directed. It just holds on like these moments where nothing particularly extreme is happening. Like, for example, I think before we get into analysis, let's just like say some of our favorite moments. One of mine is that bit where Jimmy Gator starts like fumbling on the show and, you know, his illness kicks in and it holds on him as he's like just saying words and he's clearly like, you know, out of it. I don't know. Yeah. It's just such a uncomfortable moment. It's so well done.
Yeah.
What's one of yours?
Well, I like the frog scene, as we discussed.
Oh, yeah.
I particularly like the most exciting story, because obviously there's all these different stories, right? And like you said, you didn't particularly like Linda's story very much. You didn't. Why was that?
I don't know. It's just I felt like it was a bit trite. Like there was nothing particularly engaging. Like she felt guilty that she used this guy for his money, and then it doesn't really develop from there, I feel. Does it?
Yeah, you could kind of almost cut her out.
Yeah.
Like the only way she's linked is because she is his wife. And
it provides like a reconciliation for Frank's character because he goes to visit her at the hospital at the end because she is technically family.
Right,
and, yeah,
okay.
that acts as a sort of catharsis for him, I suppose. But other than that, like, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most exciting story was definitely Frank's one. Like, the most entertaining one anyway. Like, because it was cutting between these different stories. I'm like, oh, not this one again. Oh, this one, I like this one. You know, because it's 3 hours long. It's like, yeah, it's a long haul. But, like, the one that kind of didn't excite me the most was basically Earl's story and the nurse. I kind of didn't really... Like, definitely what he says, the dialogue in the script when Earl's talking is, you know, like quite meaningful, but in terms of its entertainment value, it just kind of didn't hook me as much. But just watching Tom Cruise in what we both believe is his best role, being this misogynistic guy who's got this very complicated background. It was just so great. Like, I thought it was
Yeah.
funny. Yeah. And then I like Stanley as well, like the kid.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
Musical. There was three musical sections here, and this will be the third section at the Whistlers, and they'll play a piece that's very recognizable. It's Chopin actually, and it's taken. It's in the style of March Militaire. It's a very recognizable piece. So if you please just listen to this, and I'm sure you can identify the. I'm sort of giving away the answer here, but it's Chopin. I don't mean to give away the answer.
All right. Well, I guess let's just jump straight into it. Like, so the raining frogs.
Yep.
What does it mean?
So what I believe, like what I said before, is this movie kind of, like the frog thing is absurd, right? Like we've got, for most of the movie up until then, everything makes sense. There's nothing stupid going on. It's nothing unexpected, and it feels like real life in a movie, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then this frog event happens, and it comes out of nowhere. It's absurd. You know, it shouldn't happen, and it doesn't happen. Although, like actually, there have been historical events of shit falling from the sky, like frogs and fish and stuff. But you know, it's kind of like a biblical thing, and no one really knows if it really happens or not. There's not really much evidence, but like it's obviously meant to represent the absurd. And then following that scene is basically the end of the movie, and when the characters all sing on screen, right, they like break the fourth wall, they look into the camera and they start singing, and they're singing in unison, you know, and they all link together. And then from then on, the movie kind of becomes a little bit like, okay, it's not real life in a movie anymore. This is a movie. Like we're doing absurd things that you wouldn't observe in real life. And I guess what the frog scene represents to me is that the movie itself is about life. That's what I believe, and how all of us will connected intricately, every single life, you know, and you could hop from one story, and then, you know, I could, you know, like the two of us, right? Like someone could learn about my life. They could like see me, what I'm doing right now, and then they can like hop to you because I'm connected to you right now in terms of life, you know, like we're both doing this podcast together, and then so on and so forth. We're all connected in this intricate web, and that's kind of what the story represents. It's like it's not like I was expecting some sort of like big finale where they all meet each other and there's some grand conclusion and connection between them all, but there isn't. The connection between them, a lot of those characters, isn't very much at all. Like, you know, they just watched Stanley on the TV, but most of them don't actually meet Stanley. But that's how life works, you know. We're all just very intricately connected like that, but not very strongly connected. And when the fact that all these bad things are happening at the end, but then the frog event kind of saves everyone in a way where it doesn't, like Earl sees his son on the bed because the frogs presumably wake him up, and what's his name, Jimmy, he tries to kill himself, and then the frog saves his life. So this absurd event becomes like a savior for our characters. And then what I see that as is that this unexplainable event, this event that surpasses human life, you know, it's more than us, it may be biblical, it might be due to something more, is saving these human lives, and it basically highlights the fragility and how malleable our lives are. And that's kind of what I got out of it. My connections out of that frog scene.
Well said. Yeah. Nice.
Well said.
Yeah. Actually,
I don't know. I was just trying to. Yeah. That's my interpretation of the movie, and that's why I feel like the end is a Dharma film, Dharma feel almost in a way. You know. Yeah. What about you? What do you think it is? Fallen frogs.
Yeah. It's a nice crescendo of like the themes of causality that this movie, you know, is so heavily steeped in. And I think it mythologizes the ending in a way where it solidifies the rest of the movie in this like human drama pocket and makes it a lot more like potent. And like, as you say, like it harmonizes well with everything up until that point by making it way more meaningful. And, you know, as you said, like it causes all these things to happen for all these different characters.
Yeah.
And, you know, the concept of raining frogs is like, what's it called? Anomalous phenomena. As you say, like there are instances of it happening, though it is kind of very like biblical and mythic. Actually, PTA was very inspired by the works of Charles Fort. I think you wrote this down too, right? He's he's writes books on anomalous phenomena.
He's like well known. He's one of the first people to suggest like when people disappear that they're due to extraterrestrials. So like
Yeah,
Just
right.
shit, and other things like spontaneous combustion events, ball lightning, poltergeists, like stuff that is unexplained and still unexplained in society, but very skeptically analyzed.
Yeah, and it's just a good tie around to, as I said, like the themes of causality in this film.
Yep.
Like, it begins with the narrator positing, what he says about these are not coincidences, but something larger at work. And then you got this human drama for the majority of the movie, and then at the end it goes back to this sort of absurdist, style. I think, much to your point, is just sort of pondering like the mystery of existence and life. That's a pretty audacious thing to be like, to tackle the question, tackle such broad questions of existence like that. And much like in how film is its own language, I don't think it necessarily reaches a point in what even if he's trying to say anything, he's more just trying to evoke that ineffable feeling of like, it is just uniquely something you have to experience, and it's an ineffable feeling.
It is, and like that's what absurdism tends to have a quality of doing, is like, firstly, it does make you feel like there is meaning, but then the whole point of the absurd and absurdism is like, there is no meaning. And for that reason, it's always had this like kind of like, it's always been in like philosophical talk for millennia, this idea of things happening without cause, things happening without reason or explanation. And what it tends to do is that we just end up thinking like, well, this event happens and we have no explanation for it. And then as a human being, when you can't explain something, it's kind of scary, right? And you end up fearing it or whatever, and then and then what it ends up doing is kind of just making life seem pointless in a way, which is kind of like what absurdism actually hints at. It's like saying like, what's the point? These things just happen and don't bother explaining them. And I think that's kind of what the frog scene was implying, really. And what the start and end scene were implying as well. And like you said, like, there is no explanation for these events. But at the same time, he says it's not coincidence. So, like in a truly like kind of like cosmic sense, you would just assume that there's coincidence. It's just by chance. But the movie kind of says otherwise. It says that it's not by chance. It's not by coincidence, which is interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. At first, I thought that this movie's philosophy on, chance was sort of hinting at determinism, but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, okay, I don't actually think this is about determinism.
Yeah.
I think, and in case the audience is unfamiliar, determinism being the doctrine that all events are predetermined and everything is moving forward on a path that already exists.
Free will or not.
So like, if you skip ahead on like a comic or a book, everything is laid out for the characters, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was kind of unsure about like this movie's disposition, because the film seemed to have this emphasis on the characters' individual agencies.
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing about this was, the relationship between all those individual characters' agencies and, well, the relationship between their will and the will of this mysterious force moving events behind the scenes that the narrator posits.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think what the narrator posits as the cause behind these is reminiscent of Aristotle's unmoved mover concept from his book Metaphysics. So this unmoved mover is the primary cause of all events in the universe, moving other things, but itself not being moved. And a lot of people will probably... This will sound quite familiar. It's a common Western theological notion, God's plan.
Yeah.
The Drake song. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, God's plan as a concept is pretty widely known, right? Like
everyone has a plan for each other, which ties in with the policeman, interestingly.
Yeah, because he's like a devout Christian.
Well, when his gun's stolen, he's like, why is this happening to me?
Right,
Make me strong, God, and that's what people believe, like...
Yeah. So the thing with this unmoved mover is that in Greek philosophy, it was often conflated with the mysteries of the mind and, ideas of contemplation and what that means.
Yeah.
And then all this reminded me of a thought experiment in Robert McKee's book Story, which I talk about all the time because it's a fucking great book. There's this thought experiment called the mind worm. So the mind worm is a creature that has the power to burrow into the mind and come to know an individual thoroughly, their dreams, fears, strengths, and weaknesses. It was supposed that this creature also had the power to create events in the world. Therefore, this mind worm could create an event that was unique to the nature of the individual, and this event would act like a trigger to an adventure that would bring out the true character of an individual, demanding and stretching them on all levels of what it means to be human. So pretty much like you can see how that exercise would be conducive to storytelling, right? Naturally, you want the scope of your character's journey to be the most provocative and, depending on the kind of story it is, the most fulfilling or despairing journey that it could be for that character. Because obviously, as an audience, that is what we find most interesting, right? The extremes of life.
Yeah.
We get that epic scope in stories that we seldom get in real life, So, yeah, to bring it back to this film, I think that we were talking before that this film is set in LA, but it's set in kind of like a suburban, like kind of quiet part of LA. Like, it's not very... there's not much going on, you know?
No.
And I think that, like, the fact that this mindworm concept is applied to, like, a rather mundane setting, but, you know, it treats it like some end-of-the-world type shit, you know, as I was saying before, like, the music kind of... It helps keep that momentum in the movie, but it feels like it shouldn't be applied to these characters. I don't know.
But at the same time, it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, for us watching a film, you wouldn't expect that. But this is how our lives are all the time. It does feel like that. It feels like epic, I suppose, it's to some degree, because we are, you know, each of ourselves, we are kind of a center of our own universes, and we look at ourselves as like a movie almost. And so putting that music with the mundane lives of these characters in this movie just highlights the fact that we all kind of do that every day with ourselves.
Exactly. It's like it's as if it's saying, you know, like, don't diminish the value of these characters' lives, right?
Yeah.
The fact that the movie starts with, you know, the narrator positing this unmoved mover theory, implying that other universal causes are creating these events, but at the same time, you sympathize with these characters, with their struggles, and you just have to feel like they are making choices that, you know, regardless of any predetermined path or anything. Yeah. And I feel that really heavily both ways in this movie, that both of those things are happening, and it really reminded me of this mindworm concept. Yeah. And, you know, like, as, like, you know, PTA, this movie's about a lot of things. You know, it's the setting is from where he grew up. You know, his father was like dying of cancer and shit, and he worked at a kids quiz show. Yeah. You know, it seems like all these aspects of his life are like coalescing in this movie. And, you know, like, I think, yeah, the through line is just story itself. Like, I don't think he was necessarily going for some sort of meta philosophy, but it just seems like that is what it was on PTA's mind. It's just like fulfilling climactic story, like a really raw emotional story, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if anything, and without getting into any philosophical things, the movie itself has many different thematic themes, such as like,
exactly,
you know, like there's all this. It's a pretty fucking like gnarly film in terms of what's going on. Like in the characters themselves, you know, they're not bad characters. They're very human in the way they act. They're very natural, which is why I think the characters in this just it's so great. Like, you know, they don't feel one-sided. They're very three-dimensional, four-dimensional, whatever you want to call it. But they're not very good people, are they? Like, a lot of them do some bad shit, and they all end up admitting to it at the end. Like, Linda ends up cheating on her husband. You know, she is that trophy wife that's just literally a gold digger, and she was just cheating on him the whole time. And then bloody Jimmy ends up confessing, because he's going to die anyway, that he cheated on his wife. But on top of that he potentially molested his daughter, which he obviously did. He chooses not to remember it, but he probably more than likely did. And like, that's some pretty fucking heavy shit. And then you can see why then, like, and I thought that was a great thing, like, to add at the end of the movie, where, you know, you weren't really sure what the fuck was going on between Claudia and her dad. And I never would have guessed that anyway. But now it kind of makes sense why Claudia ended up the way she did, is because of her dad, you know. And like, and then on top of that, that's poor parenting from that father. And then you got Stanley and his father, and Donnie and his father, or his parents, which we don't meet his parents because that happened many decades ago. But like, it shows there's this strong element in here of, like, you know, improper parenting basically. And then there's all these other things, right, like regret and loneliness, and like, it's just, I mean, obviously, like you say, like, it does sound like it's based on a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson's life himself. Like, a lot of these things were reflected in his personal life, and maybe that's kind of what he based it on. And it gives good commentary on those things. Like, it explores them very well.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, the multitude of themes. It seems like you wouldn't be able to focus on a single, like, feeling or emotion when exploring all these things, especially with this ensemble of characters. But he you know, but by extension, like all these are aspects of, you know, life and living, and that's how he connects them all in like a really eloquent way. Yeah.
There are stories of coincidence and chance and intersections and strange things told, and which is which and who only knows. And we generally say, well, if that was in a movie, I wouldn't believe it. Someone so-and-so met someone else's so-and-so, and so on. And it is in the humble opinion of this narrator that strange things happen all the time. And so
also, I don't know, is there a meaning in her dad, Claudia's dad, being Jim and the policeman being Jim? Is there something there? I don't know. Is that just another weird
never noticed that,
coincidence?
but yeah, they do have the same name, don't they? Which is like, why would you bother
Yeah.
doing that when, you know, you have a limitless number of names to pick and create these characters,
Yes.
but why create the same name?
That's why I've got my tinfoil hat on, man. Like, there's
What,
maybe
do you have a
something
theory?
there. No, I don't have a theory. I just, it's peculiar is all.
I mean, I suppose, like, in terms of relating these two characters, I reckon that out of all these different characters in the movie, these two are the most opposite. You know, they're the most, because Jim Curing, the policeman, he's, without doubt, aside from Stanley, of course, because he's a child, but without doubt, out of all the adult characters, he is the most well-meaning character, at least as what we see in the film. He means the best, and he's the best character, I suppose, the most good character, if for lack of a better word, you know. And then Jimmy, on the other hand, by the end of it, you're like, yeah, fuck, he's a pretty bad, like, he's not a bad person by then, but obviously, you know, it's questionable what he did. It's very questionable what he did. He did a very bad thing, and none of the other characters reach that level quite. So, in my opinion, they are opposites. So, but to give them the same name, yeah, it's kind of a strange thing. Why do that?
Yeah. I mean, it does paint Jimmy kind of sympathetic, like Jimmy Gator, but I had no sympathy by the end of the movie for him. Like, fuck, that's a pretty bad thing he did.
Yeah, it is.
And you know,
yeah.
like I think it very heavily implies that he did, and he just, as you said, he chooses not to remember.
Yeah, he chooses not. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say, but I mean, the fact that he can't just say no, I didn't do it, implies that he must think to some degree that he could have done it, which means he probably fucking done it, and then therefore he's just chosen to forgot it, which you know, and that's an inexcusable thing to do.
And his daughter's pretty convinced that, you know, like she hates him, so obviously.
Yeah. And
anyway,
and then she turns out the way she did. So yeah, it's
So with the kid Stanley, so there's like a theological parallel you could draw here. So when the frogs start raining, he's the only one that's like kind of calm, and you know, he says this is the thing that happens, as if he like sort of anticipated this maybe. And so in Hebrew mythology, in Exodus, Moses makes a plague of frogs come down on Egypt because the Pharaoh wouldn't release the Israelites. So I guess at the end he says he's the one who goes to his father and he confronts him. He says, "You need to be nicer to me," as if he's the savior of all the other people who have been disenfranchised by their fathers, right?
Yeah.
So he's the one that finally stood up to his father. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Yeah, at least metaphorically anyway, it could definitely represent that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Either that or he's just a fucking weirdo and doesn't get fazed by falling frogs.
Yeah, that's very possible.
Yeah.
He seems to know every trivia question under the sun, so who knows what's going on inside that kid's mind.
Yeah, fuck. Like, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And with that haircut too, you can't trust a boy like that.
Also, like, it's curious how, you know, Donnie is a character that was essentially Stanley back, you know, when he was a kid.
Yeah.
So, and
he turned out to be not an interesting, you know, special person anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, those two characters never meet, but there's just a lot of parallels across the board.
Yeah.
You know, again, like coincidences.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What do you think is the meaning of the weather statements? Because obviously it you know, every day is like well, not every day, but like at every moment at some points it has a line across the screen literally just stating the weather like you would see on the weather forecast. And then obviously that's like tied in with the frogs falling from the sky, because clearly that's a weather event. But why bother actually like specifying sunny, 34 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever it was, you know? Like, it just seemed like a weird thing to me.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like it's akin to when other movies do that with, you know, dates.
Yeah.
They have the date across the screen, but this one is just, it's the weather is acting as like a like a clock or like a calendar of time, you know?
Yeah, true. Like signals.
Yeah.
Maybe an act kind of thing of the movie.
Yeah,
You know, like
yeah,
usually
exactly.
you
Just to
split
denote.
up the plot up into days. We're splitting the plot up into how the weather changes. And I guess
Yeah,
when,
exactly.
like we said before, the frog event does signify a significant change in the way the movie feels. So again, you have a change in sequence or act when the frog event happens.
And you know, isn't that a thing people say to like denote things changing, like the weather changes? You know, it's like the weather. Saying the weather changes is like saying circumstances change.
Yeah,
in people's lives
true.
and shit,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
and the weather is used very much like that. Like,
yeah,
yeah, true. All right.
yeah.
Do you have anything? Because I got one more question.
Yeah, you go for it.
A bit of character analysis. Frank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tom Cruise. I was reading this like review article by, I can't remember, but he called Frank a slick televangelist of penis power. How good is that as a description for him? But anyway, but it's interesting, right? Like he loathes his father very much like how Claudia loathes her father, and Claudia loathes her father because, you know, more than likely he molested her when she was younger, and Frank hates his father because he wasn't around to help his dying mother, and the mother died basically in Frank's hands. Like Frank was helping his mother out who had cancer, and he just absolutely loathes his father and still does to the end, even when he's on his deathbed. So he obviously has contempt for his father, that's clear. And then he obviously probably loved his mother, right? He didn't want her to die, blah, blah, blah. So why does he take on a role on a business that is highly misogynistic and anti-female, basically? It's a very interesting, like, you know, like he clearly hates his father, but it just does it. Like, maybe if it was the opposite way around, where his mother did this to him, it would make a little bit more sense why he's running this business of trying to. I mean, what even is this business anyway? I was so fucking like confused at the start. He's
a pickup artist.
Yeah, he's okay. Is that a thing? Like,
That's a thing.
I've never watched TV
Absolutely,
before, and
that's a
some
thing.
blows telling me how to hook up with a chick or something. Like,
Yeah, dude. They're like I think in the 90s and like yuppie culture and shit. That was like a big thing. Books being written on how to pick up women.
Yeah, well, his character is very misogynist, and like, you know, like it's like, you know, obviously it's released in 1999. Things were a little bit different back then, but I feel like if you release this movie now with a character like that, someone would complain. Which I'm not saying that PTA is standing for that at all, because he's obviously not. But people would complain nowadays about a character like that.
Well, I was drawing parallels between his audience members and incels today. You know,
incels being
like incels are men on the internet who are sour that they can't get with women and blame women for like all their problems and shit.
Yeah, I suppose that's the equivalent.
Yeah,
back then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So Frank T.J. Mackey is an interesting foil to the themes of causality, because his whole thing is that he's trying to take life by the balls, right? He's trying to control life and not let it fuck him over.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, his mother and that whole story is a source of weakness for him. And I think maybe his misogynistic exterior is a way of, you know, burying that and not having to confront it, so as to focus on what he can control in life, you know.
I think you hit that nail right on its head. That's fucking exactly why. That makes complete sense. I accept that.
Yeah, cool.
and question.
Yeah, we showed you the method to the madness. There you go.
That's good. No, that's a good one. Yeah. That makes sense.
What you are, you cocksucker, Earl. It hurts, doesn't it? Huh? You in a lot of pain? She was in a lot of pain. Right to the end, she was in a lot of pain. I know, because I was there, Earl. You didn't like illness, though, do you?
Yeah. All right, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I reckon.
All right, sweet. You have any recommendations for this week?
I do. So,
hey.
Yeah, absurdism is kind of what I took from this movie, obviously, as you've heard me talk about, and the frogs. And it reminded me of this particular scene in the TV show Fargo, not the movie by the Coen Brothers, the TV show. And the Fargo TV series is fucking great. Like, it is honestly, you haven't seen it yet, have you? Like, it's you've seen a couple of I don't know, but yeah, it's like, it's incredible. Like, it's up there with Breaking Bad for me. Like, I love it. And this TV series is filled with absurdism, and there's actually a scene in it when fish rain from the sky, and
Oh, cool.
it's full of the absurdist things, including that fish raining from the sky, and just having animals and shit that shouldn't normally rain from the sky is the way that you convey absurdism, and that's what happens in this. And so, in other words, if you kind of like, it's completely different thematically and stuff like that, but if you like the absurdist tendencies in Magnolia, then you definitely will enjoy Fargo. And even if you don't like Magnolia, you'll fucking enjoy Fargo because it's so good.
Yeah, nice. I think in the vein of wild coincidences and like touches of absurdism, In Bruges is a very good movie with those themes. Have you seen that? In Bruges with Colin Farrell and Dom something Gleeson,
It's not even something I've heard of.
It's a very good movie. And if you like movies with an ensemble cast and like mystery and figuring out who's who and who's doing what, The Hateful Eight is a very good film about that.
Okay, I still haven't seen that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I rewatched Django the other night. Fuck me, that's such a good movie. Anyway.
We should do it sometime.
Yeah, we should actually. All right, where can people find us, Mitchie?
People can find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, or Stitcher. We have a website, amttm.com, where you can find our Facebook and Instagram pages. And if you have any questions or queries, please send through to our email, mail@amttm.com. And if you like our content, visit zeroindent.com.
Nice. And what are we doing next week?
American Psycho, I believe.
Hey.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
New
I
Year's special. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's on our list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is a movie set around Christmas/New Year's, so that'll be somewhat relevant.
Yeah, it's snowy in New York,
Yeah.
so probably. Yeah, and again, this is our Christmas special, so I hope you enjoyed. And I was saying that with irony. It's not actually a Christmas... Like, this is released on Christmas Day, but it's... Yeah, we made no fucking effort to... Didn't even think about it. Didn't even realize it was Christmas.
I mean, we did think about it. There aren't many great Christmas films to analyze.
Yeah, true. That was... Yeah, so we ended up
the
doing
Santa
Magnolia.
Claus with Tim Allen. Yeah.
Elf, I don't know.
And I think this was a good pick.
Yeah,
I've
it's
been
not
meaning to watch this
really
for a long time
Christmassy.
anyway. Yeah. Fuck it, dude. All right. See you next time. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Goodbye.